Today's video is brought to you by Walt's Comic Shop. Stay tuned until the end to find out more. Enough time has passed. Move aside, Precure. There's a new magical girl in town. Hojo Colleen! Red-haired they! By the power of the video essay, sources and references, banish thee! Okay, so I'm gonna go sit over there now. Oh. For years, people have asked, what happened to the magical girl? There used to be no shortage of impeccably fashionable high schoolers fighting baddies what feels like decades ago now. The 90s and 2000s were full of stories like these in both anime and manga for young girls to aspire to. Sailor Moon, Shugo Chara, Cardcaptors, Tokyo Mew Mew, you name it. However, as all things do, the trend fizzled out. And now publishers are beginning to rely on the nostalgia of our youth by putting out sequels and spin-off series of these beloved classics. So it's not a surprise that people are hungry for fresh and new magical girls, especially ones that come from shoujo manga. The people long for coming-of-age stories where girls learn the power of friendship through magic and fighting bad guys, all while looking cute as heck while doing it. Which is why when a new magical girl popped up a few months ago, Twitter went feral. Magical girl Dandelion has blossomed. A new shoujo series by the author Kaoru Mizuho, which began publishing in the magazine ShocomI back in August. This was a classic-looking magical girl series that had a little bit of a twist to it. When word first broke about magical girl Dandelion by the people over at WSS Talkback, and photos accompanied it, thousands were excited for this manga's potential. The first big draw for a vast majority of people was simply that it was a new magical girl manga. One that was not a parody, a deconstruction, or otherwise. Just a real, born and bred magical girl which featured a battling cutie named Tempopo with an adorable flower aesthetic and an umbrella to fight with. The other enticing aspect for this promo art for many was the Tumblr sexy man design of the co-lead Shade, a villainous-looking shadow who befriends our heroine after he saves her from another ghoulish fiend. From the start, there was literally only character designs to go off of. The chapter didn't come out for another week when the posts were made, and the synopsis was only a sentence long. But this didn't stop everyone and their oomphs from creating fan art of these two. Only a few days after the first tweets of this shoujo series went viral, artwork came flooding in. People were all in on a manga that didn't even technically have a story yet, simultaneously bombarding the author Kaoru Mizuho, who was so graciously responding to all of the fan art that she was coming across. I can't even begin to imagine how crazy it would be to see hundreds halfway across the world making fan art of your series that hasn't even debuted yet. The phenomenon over magical girl Dandelion really felt like shoujo's version of Kagurabachi. Although instead of clowning on a series for looking like generic Shonen Jump title number 5000, people were actually very enticed by a really unique looking new shoujo, genuinely getting invested in what story these two characters would hold beyond their initial designs. Also, much like Kagurabachi, Viz capitalized on this wild occurrence by licensing it in English. This time with only 3 chapters out, not even a volume, and for a simulpub release, making Magical Girl Dandelion pretty monumental for shoujo fans who often have to wait years for sought-after series to get officially picked up. The fervor around this manga has really shown that people have magical girl-shaped holes in their hearts. At least, people in the US. The instant attachment we had to magical girl Dandelion has highlighted the lack of magical girls that we've gotten in recent years. The past 2 decades have brought fewer and fewer new blood as we stray further and further away from the era of Sailor Moon. However, this absence is not from a lack of demand. People still love magical girls. It's actually for an entirely different reason that we see less of these kinds of series. And no, I know what you're thinking, it's not because of Madoka Magica. I once thought that too. It actually all stems from the existence of the magical juggernaut that is Pretty Cure. Now, before we get into the meat of this video, I want to state outright that I've never really considered myself a big fan of magical girls. I have loved my fair share, like Card Captors, and I was super into Shugo-chara as well, but I have also committed the great sin of never really being into Sailor Moon. From what I can tell as well, magical girl fans don't seem to be specifically fans of shoujo manga either. So what I'm getting at here is that maybe you love all magical girls, and you don't consider shoujo to be the end-all be-all of the genre or even the start of it. That's fine, but this video is more about the shoujo manga aspect, and that's what I'll be covering because that's personally what I care about more. So let's get into it. It would be safe to say that most Americans view the seminal magical girl to be Sailor Moon. With her insane popularity and recognizability, she has become the face of the genre. This is not really the case in Japan anymore though. Not to say the series has lost its sparkle, it's still beloved by many. But there has been a new magical girl in a shiny new costume out on the town since 2004. Pretty Cure, or Pre-Cure for short. An absolute behemoth of an anime series that has been airing consecutively for 20 years now. The first season of this anime, called Futari wa Pretty Cure, was created to take the place of Ojamajo Doremi, another magical girl series, during the coveted Sunday Kids block of television, one of the biggest blocks for TV programming for kids in Japan, which features Super Sentai and Kamen Rider. Pre-Cure actually didn't come from a manga series first and was created from scratch to kind of resemble the superhero shows that I just mentioned. So on release, this anime original was applauded for being a new spin on the magical girl. While the genre has always been full of action and fights, it usually involves magical battles. Pre-Cure changed this formula by introducing more hand-to-hand combat that was inspired from martial arts. The tagline even ended up being, "Sometimes girls want to rampage too." This new shakeup of the fights in a magical girl series is what many noted as being what solidified this anime's cross-demo appeal, gaining it fast popularity. Since then, Pre-Cure has remained in the cultural zeitgeist since it premiered all those years ago. The absolute domination of this anime has basically knocked out any potential for other magical girl series to enter the limelight. From the 2010s on, new magical girl series were dwindling in appearance in shoujo magazines, and more Pre-Cure spin-offs were taking their place. Any new shoujo magical girl series had to fight Pre-Cure, not just in manga form, but in the media mix as well. Most magical girl series rely on anime adaptations, video games, toys, and merchandise if they want to see any minutia of success. But with Pre-Cure around, they were just going to solo anything that showed up. This is why, despite the love for the magical girl, we've had so few as of late. If Sailor Moon's success started the genre trend that everyone wanted to hop on, then Pre-Cure single-handedly ended it. Don't get me wrong, we have had a few magical girl series that came out in the past 10 years, but that's just loose change in comparison to the 90s and 2000s. These were, however, the exact kind of magical girl series that many said that they were craving. They just never got their time to shine or even really go on for more than a couple volumes. Titles like Stellar Witch Lips, Brat Hunt Chu, or Acro Trip Trip were trucking along to little fanfare. Although Acro Trip, which is a comedic, self-referential magical girl series, has an anime airing right now, so I better see you guys supporting it. With that being said, magical girls weren't dead or anything. The pre-cure craze is not going away in Japan anytime soon, and magical girl transformations can still be found. It was more that magical girl shoujo manga series were on the brink of death and just needed the power of love to revive them, which is hopefully where magical girl Dandelion can come in. The fact that the series not only got immediate attention, but also a simulpub release before 3 chapters even came out, shows that there's still demand for shoujo manga in this genre. With 4 chapters of the series out right now, I can also confidently say that magical girl Dandelion definitely lives up to the hype. The manga is about a young girl named Tempopo whose parents were killed in front of her by a fiend. These fiends are villainous creatures that feed off the life force of humans. However, before she could be killed herself, she was saved by another fiend named Shade, who decided to protect her from then on. Years later, Tempopo is now in high school, and she gets approached by the Special Magical Warrior Organization. This is a government defense group that hires humans with potential to become magical girls to fight off fiends. It's here that Tempopo discovers she can become a magical girl herself, no longer having to cower in Shade's shadow or depend on him to protect her. Shade is, however, opposed to her joining this organization, despite her own wishes, since it would make them enemies. But when Tempopo encounters a fiend on her way home from school, magical girl Dandelion blossoms. This first set of chapters focuses more on how Tempopo feels about becoming a magical girl. She seems to be enamored with the idea of becoming a magical girl due to the ability she would gain to protect her loved ones, but conflict arises with Shade's own feelings as a fiend. The relationship between these two is very similar to that of a parental bond, or at the very least an older brother, younger sibling bond. It is clear already that Shade does genuinely care about Tempopo and wants to keep her safe. However, it's also clear that Shade is hiding something deeper about the fighting between the factions of humans and fiends. It's a very interesting conflict to start this manga with, as it feels like a more modern take on the genre. Another interesting initial plot point is that magical girls are put together by a government organization. While usually magical girls have a destiny or innate ability that bonds an informal team together, this way of doing it makes it feel a little more clinical, recruiting them based on skill level through an agency like it's a job. It has much more of a Marvel movie setup than a magical girl one. Honestly, the only magical girl series that I can think of which is kind of close to this sort of premise would be Kigurumi Guardians. Also a bit of Shugochara, but they were more of a student council and they weren't formed by the government or anything. While I'm not exactly sure of where Mizuho's inspiration for a magical girl organization came from, we can trace the relationship between Tempopo and Shade to another story that Mizuho gave as an influence. According to an interview they did with WSS Talkback, Here Comes the Black Witch was stated as their biggest magical girl influence. This children's novel series features a young girl who ends up having to join forces with a black witch after she accidentally summoned them. You can definitely see the parallel between these two series, even if it is at surface level. Tempopo being the bright, clumsy girl who accidentally forms a relationship with a dark, shadowy figure that towers over her, who, despite appearances, is incredibly caring. As for the designs in Magical Girl Dandelion, I find that the flower aesthetic is very unique. Of the few magical girls we've met so far in this series, Tempopo is Dandelion, obviously, and her mentor from the Special Magical Warrior organization is called Peony. There's also the leader of the organization, who's kind of flower adjacent in his codename, which is Butterfly. Even though they have these flower names, there's nothing that really reflects this concept outside of the colorways. There's no real uniformity in their outfits, which makes them feel less like a team and more like superheroes that were gathered together. I am curious to see if this flower concept has any sort of origins or background for the series as we continue on. Outside of the story, I think what is most interesting to me is that Magical Girl Dandelion is a Magical Girl manga that's published in ShocomI. This is a publisher that rarely ever put out Magical Girl manga, even if you go back to the heyday. ShocomI is pretty well known for their raunchy series that usually have more action and violence. Think series like Ceres, Red River, or even the more recent Yakuza title, Snake and Butterfly. Yes, there's fights in these manga, there's action in these manga, there's romance, but the thing is, none of them are magical girls. The magical girl is often more tied to Nakayoshi and Kodansha because pretty much every shoujo in that genre in the 90s and 2000s came from that magazine and publisher. To see Shogakukan and ShocomI come out with a magical girl series so many years later is a really interesting move. Something that, if it works, could really pay off for them. Mizuho acknowledges this fact as well, stating that Magical Girl Dandelion is very different from the target audience of ShocomI. I feel that this is less so in the art or the premise, as Magical Girl Dandelion still has that edge that ShocomI loves, but more so in the fact that it's taking a real-world tone in the magical girl genre. There is plenty of magic in this series so far, but it feels less mythicized than in Magical Girl's past. You know, Sailor Moon is a celestial being, Card Captors has ancient magicians, Shugo Chara has eggs born of the heart, but Magical Girl Dandelion has a latent ability, one that could be held by anyone with the right test scores, making it much more distinct amongst other shoujo like it. It also kind of sets itself apart in ShocomI because the action is much more hard-hitting in this manga. I find that this is due to one big reason, being that Mizuho's line work is much heavier than that of typical shoujo series. The emotion conveyed feels more defiant, and the impact of the attacks, while they are magic beams, feel like a punch in the gut. Which does make me wonder if Precure had any impact on the magical girl genre's fight scenes to be more action-heavy and impactful. All in all, Magical Girl Dandelion has so much potential to be the next big shoujo series. That is, if the series is given proper marketing. It does seem promising though in that regard, as ShocomI has really been pushing it on their Twitter account, and also just the fact that we already have it as a simulpub in English. They don't even have a volume to sell us yet, so the fact that they've been pushing it so much may mean that they are confident in its success. We've yet to see what the actual reception in Japan looks like, but I do have quite a bit of hope for this manga. The real lasting impact will come from whether Magical Girl Dandelion goes through the media mix to solidify her as the new magical girl for generations of shoujo girlies in the future. Personally, as someone who only knows a handful of shoujo magical girls from the 2000s, Magical Girl Dandelion is a fresh little twist on what many have grown up on. It manages this while still staying true to what people love about this genre. Tanpopo is the usual clumsy high school girl with a heart of gold who just wants to protect those that she loves. She's goofy, she's relatable, and she's got the perfect amount of sweet, but also packing a punch. She wants to become a magical girl not just because she admires them, but she wants to enact some real change herself. This sort of playing on the idea of girls who grew up on magical girls themselves wanting to become one as well. It really modernizes a staple genre that many have become used to. In the age of nostalgia bait sequel series from old classics, it's great to see a new magical girl series spring up in the demographic that started it. While magical girls haven't always been for just young girls, shoujo is still definitely what shaped this genre for so many people. So to see it return to its roots with Mizuho's spin is really fun as an outside observer of magical girl series, but a rabid fan of all things shoujo. When the hype on Twitter appeared, I was already intrigued, but with 4 chapters out now, I'm fully invested. I cannot wait to see where Magical Girl Dandelion takes me and the future of magical girls in shoujo next. The sponsor of today's video is Walt's Comic Shop. Are you looking for English language manga in the EU? Then Walt's Comic Shop is just what you need. Walt's has thousands of manga currently in stock with an inventory that's growing daily. They offer low shipping prices for any EU country with bulletproof packaging and a speedy customer support. When you enter the code Colleen's Manga Rex at checkout, you'll get free shipping on your first order of 40 euros. You can get all the shoujo and josei manga you need at waltscomicshop.com, your #1 source for English language manga in Europe.